Hello, everyone, and welcome into another episode of the Payne and Drain Show following the Lions' 14th win of the season, toppling the San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football as their franchise best season continues to get better. And yet, it doesn't really matter because it's all going to come down to the pivotal final week of the season. I'm your host, Zach Payne. With me, as always, is my co host, Alex Drain. And Alex, how are we feeling ahead of perhaps the most anticipated regular season game ever?
Probably in Lions history, although I don't know. It's an interesting game. We'll talk about the stakes later on. There have definitely been other big ones before. The one I keep him kind of flashing back to is when we played Green Bay in 2016 with the NFC North title on the line. I think it was New Year's Day 2017 was when that game was, but that one was at home. It was the Sunday night season ending game, and that one didn't go too well. Hopefully this one will go better, but definitely big stakes on the line. Guys are going to be excited, but there's definitely some things to talk about with the San Francisco game that will be somewhat instructive going into this coming week. So it was kind of a meaningless game, but there was still some important talking points.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone listening at home, you'll probably hear that my audio sounds significantly worse this week as I'm once again recording remotely with the headset audio. So bear with me. I apologize for that. I'll be back in my regular setup next week. And just before we get into the show, as always, you can find us on Twitter at Payne and Drain. You can find me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. And as always, when we like to recap these games, we will start on the offensive side of the ball in a game in which the Lions really needed to lean on their offense to just keep pace with the 49ers early and often as the Niners kept putting up points with ease, which we'll get to in a little bit. But the offense for the entire game was very productive. There was one miscue on a fourth down in the red zone. But aside from that, they were pretty perfect. And Jack Fox very obviously didn't have to punt in this game. So that's always a good sign. But just focusing on the early stages of the game, how important was it that the offense was able to match the touchdowns just to keep pace with the Niners' success?
Oh, I mean, it was essential, and it's interesting kind of looking at the offense from this year because there's some interesting sort of history things we should talk about at the end of this segment. But you look at the Lions season for the first 12-ish games, they were leading basically wire to wire in almost all those games. I think they're right with the Vikings for most time spent leading in a game this season. And so we got some of these games where they were kind of in score effects mode in the second half. You think back to that Packers game in Green Bay, obviously the Titans game, the Cowboys game. There's a number of games this year where the Lions got up big early and were in a situation where they could kind of comfortably coast in the second half. Now we've seen the last few weeks, particularly the Packers, Bills, and this game, where it's pretty clear the defense is going to be in some trouble, where the other team's going to be scoring a lot, and it's forced the Lions to actually play 60-minute games offensively. And the result is they've scored 34, 42, and 40 points. And this game, pretty much from the jump, you're sort of like, well, they got to just keep scoring and scoring and scoring. The Niners score touchdowns on their first four real possessions. They miss a field goal on one at the end of a half where they run out of time, but the offense was put with their backs against the wall. The Niners got the ball first, and as a result, had a lead for a lot of this game. And the offense rose to the occasion every single time, and it's what you need to win games. We've talked about how the Lions can win all different kinds of games. I think with the defensive situation, their scripts are now more limited, but the scripts they're now working off of are the offense just outscores the other team. And so far, it's gone pretty well.
Yeah, and when speaking on the offense in the first half of this game specifically, it wasn't the Amon-Ra St. Brown show as it has been for a good portion of the season. He came more into focus in the second half of the game. Early on, it was all about the efficiency from Jahmyr Gibbs on the ground, which continued throughout the game. But this was definitely a game where Gibbs, despite having fewer touches than he did a week ago against Chicago, very efficient game from Gibbs, and he maximized the touches despite not having any true breakaway runs or like massive 50-yard plays in this one.
Yeah, I early on in this game, the contrasting styles between the two teams were pretty evident, where San Francisco is mostly throwing the ball, Lions mostly running it. And we were watching this. My mom just kept saying, why aren't we throwing it? The Niners are throwing it all over us. And I'm like, well, we're running it, and it's going great. Right? There's no real reason to go away from that early on, where they were really hammering away at the Niners for 5-6 yards per carry in those first couple drives. And they were able to get some different guys involved. I think the first couple drives aren't even necessarily totally the Gibbs show. He was really good, but on that first drive, you have an 8-yard carry from Jamar Jefferson
Hmm.
on 1st and goal at the 9, gets them down right to the goal line. You also had a 26-yard sort of run after the catch from Craig Reynolds on that drive as well. So they were mixing some guys in and putting it in their hands, and they were able to get a lot of success on the ground. They score a touchdown in the rushing fashion with Jameson Williams. And on that first drive, they tried the JMO reverse, which I think was an interesting thing to discuss because of its most famous appearance also being on the first drive in San Francisco. I don't think that was probably a great idea, because if there were any plays you'd expect the Niners to be ready for, it'd probably be that one, and they certainly were. So just something to note, but they definitely kept it on the ground early because it was working. And then really on that second drive, once they get into the 2nd and 24 situation, is when they started to have to throw it a little bit more. You get the hook and ladder touchdown, and from that point forward, they were a little more balanced. But the run game was effective throughout the game. They run for 4.6 yards per carry, and you look at their running backs, Reynolds 4.4 and Gibbs 6.5. And it was a good game for those two guys.
Yeah, and Jameson Williams specifically, we've talked about all season. He is a bit of a spark plug just in his ability to create these massive touchdowns. He had a huge one against Chicago a week ago, and against the Niners, the hook and ladder. I mean, at this point, the Lions, we know that they run hook and ladder plays more than anyone in the NFL in the past however many years, because it's just not a popular play. The Lions are trying as hard as they possibly can to make this a trend, because every time they've done it, it has worked to varying degrees of success. And this was kind of their magnum opus on a 3rd and 11 or 12, where Amon Ra flips it back to Jameson Williams, who just takes off. You're not going to catch him. It was just, it was special. It was spectacular.
Yeah, I had this down as a 3rd and 12. I'd have to look at the play-by-play, but not really relevant. It was 3rd and long. This was an interesting one because Amon-Ra was really close to being down before he could
Yeah.
pitch it. I'm not sure if his knee was down and he wasn't touched, or whether it wasn't quite down, but either way, he wasn't down by contact, so he is allowed to pitch it, and it works from there. I said this, I think, last week, where I would just keep running this, because the way I look at it, I don't really know how any team is going to be able to defend it. Like, the reason that teams don't run the hook and ladder very much is simply because, well, it can go really wrong. It's a very risky play. You're willingly pitching it up into the air. If the timing isn't right, you put the ball on the ground, it's a possible turnover. But if you've practiced this really well and you have the timing down, which the Lions have had the timing down perfectly, team to practice it a decent amount, then I would keep doing it, because how does a defense defend that? Like, you're just not programmed to be able to watch for the lateral on a different guy running the other direction. Guys go after the ball carrier, because 99% of plays, that's who you need to tackle. So until someone shows a way to reorient their defense to stop it, I would just keep doing it, because it just keeps working, and it's a really, really hard play to defend. And the funny thing was that after this play happened, there's a Michigan football account who is not a Lions fan, so hasn't necessarily seen a lot of their games, but being a national TV game, was watching the game, and he was like, "Why are they bringing out the hook and ladder on a meaningless game?" And it's like, this isn't a trick play. This is our base. This is part of our bread and butter at this point. So it just keeps working. So just keep doing it until someone can stop it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think a very important thing to note is the hook and ladder that the Lions run. It's mostly run through Amon-Ra St. Brown on these little in routes, and I'm pretty sure at this point that it's an option, because the way Amon-Ra was talking about the play is he kind of described it as, once he knew that he was kind of trapped with defenders around him, he kind of looked up and there's an option with a guy like running across the middle, and if it's open, he'll pitch it. So I'm willing to bet that at some point down, either in week 18 or in the playoffs, the Lions might have a fake hook and ladder go at some point where if it, say it's a 3rd and 7, Amon-Ra catches it 2 yards behind the sticks, he can fake pitch it just to buy himself that extra half yard to get the first down. It certainly seems like a possibility. And if it's not there, if the defense keys in on it, I think Amon-Ra has the freedom and the IQ, quite frankly, to not pitch it if it's not there. So very interesting base that they have to work with as down the stretch.
Yeah, Zach, I don't know if you've ever seen this play, but there's a coach, Jeff Brom, who is at Purdue and now is at Louisville, who's run a fake flea flicker a decent
Mm-hmm.
amount. He ran it against us in the Big Ten Championship game a few years ago, but it works. It's a brilliant play. You get the running back, run forward, and then if there's a defender there, right as he does the fake pitch, and the defender goes running towards the quarterback, and then he just runs right up the middle for like a chunk gain, and it's a great play. And so if we can get a sizable gain off a fake a fake hook and ladder as the fake flea flicker works, go for it. Right? You
Mm-hmm.
start hitting them with trick plays, then you build the deception off the trick play. It's just more and more ways to be a really dangerous offense.
Yeah, and for the NBA fans out there, it's very similar to the old Rajon Rondo fake behind the back pass where he makes it look like he's going to pass it back and it just freezes the defender for half a second to allow him to get to the rim and get a layup. And the Lions, they have so many trick plays. They have so many unique and creative looks that they'll use throughout a game that it forces defenses to kind of be on their toes the whole time. And when that happens, you have the ability to freeze them with an extra little like half fake or whatnot. So it even plays, I guess, while we're on the topic of trick plays, the Lions did run a fake end around to Penei Sewell in this game. The play went nowhere, but I tweeted this out that look, based on how little the defense reacted to Sewell going in motion, there is going to be some freedom for Ben Johnson to try some more things. Because if defenses are so used to Sewell being in the backfield, as weird as that is, like if they saw obviously the pass attempt that didn't work, if there's an end around to Penei Sewell, who's going to really worry about that, right? There's going to be a chance for a little play action dump off, I think, in the future. So going to be curious to watch that as well. Were there any other like unique concepts in this game that you had flagged?
Not really. I didn't go too heavily back over the offense. I was mostly looking at the defense on
Mm-hmm.
rewatch. It just pretty much everything worked in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the drive chart for the Lions in this one: touchdown, touchdown, downs in the red zone, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, kneel down. Like every single thing worked in this game. Niners really had no answers, which was pretty impressive considering that the Niners have some injuries on defense, but not completely devastated by any stretch. Like Bosa was
Mm-hmm.
playing and played really well.
Really
Pete Warner
well.
played and had a nice game. They had some other guys that were there. It was not a 100% defense, but this is a unit that the previous week. Dolphins got 29. Okay, week before that, Rams had 12 in the rain. Like they haven't been a league worst defense or anything, and the Lions just completely smoked them. And I think for me, it starts with Goff as always. It wasn't like a particularly legendary Goff game, but this is the standard he's established, and the
Mm-hmm.
standard he's established to me is the best quarterback in the NFC right now. I think you look league wide, there's probably four guys you can make the case are better in the big four of the AFC between Allen, Mahomes, who's obviously not having a great year, but pedigree, etc. Lamar, and then Joe Burrow, who's had a great year. Those four guys, I think, yeah, they're better than Goff. I think Goff's got an argument on everybody else. The way he has played the last 13 weeks, the best 13-week stretch I've ever seen a Lions quarterback play. In 26 of 34 in this game, 303 for nearly 9 yards an attempt, 3 touchdowns. I only had 2 issues with Goff. Number one, the fourth down they don't get wasn't
Yep.
an easy throw, but he did leave that ball up too long. It gave the DB a chance to recover and bat it down. And then he takes an awful sack
Mm.
that gets bailed out because Jake Bates makes a great field goal, but he was going to be sacked either way. The issue was the spin out, run backwards, the old Goff that we saw years ago. it turned a field goal that was going to be about 50 to into 57, which in most circumstances is a massive deal and could be the difference between 3 points and zero. So that was bad. Otherwise, that's about it. Like I think he had a throw to JMO on a screen that was too low. Small stuff like that, but just continues to take care of the ball, continues to put the ball in catchable places. He's dead on accurate. He's not just checking it down. He's moving around in the pocket. He's finding guys. I mean, he has a rollout on the 2 point conversion to Tim Patrick. It's just the amount of growth in Goff's game over the past few years is really remarkable. And his passer rating, I believe, is now up to 113.6. Top 20 all time in a single season. Hard to beat that.
Yeah, and look, going back to that fourth down you mentioned, my gripe with that play wasn't even necessarily the throw. It was the fact that he didn't progress through his reads to see a wide open Tim Patrick and wide open Jameson Williams on the backside of that play. Tim Patrick runs just a little 7 yard, or not even seven, it might have been a 5 yard post route into the end zone, and he's wide open. And JMO runs kind of a double move, like kind of a stick and nod almost up the middle, and he's also wide open on the backside of that play. So and there was another play later in the game. I believe it was on a third down in which Goff locked in on Laporta and just threw it in the dirt because the defender was right there. And if he had waited another half beat and peeked to his right, Jahmyr Gibbs was leaking out into the flat past a linebacker in man coverage, and there was no one covering the right side of the field at all. So the like with Goff, we know that this offense is very rhythm based. It's based on timing. It's based on Goff pre-snap being able to determine, okay, this guy's going to be open there, this guy's going to be there, the linebacker's going to move like this, and he'll just kind of make decisions before the snap, and then after the snap, if those decisions are there, he'll confirm it. Okay, time to throw. A great example of that is on the touchdown to Sam Laporta. It's a simple read. He just needs D Winters to be in man coverage and go to Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay, the second he turns his back, he knows that Laporta is going to be open on the angle route, fits it into a tight window for a touchdown. So it's the gift and the curse of this offense is because it's so rhythm based. If a defense is able to disrupt that rhythm, it obviously causes problems. Nick Bosa tried his best to do that, and Taylor Decker struggled to block Bosa for a lot of this game, but a lot of people struggle to block Bosa in the NFL, so it's not too much fault on Decker there. So in general, very good game from Goff, not necessarily his best of the season. And the offensive line, I thought for the most part was pretty good, in especially in pass protection, aside from dealing with Bosa. For obviously he probably had, I don't know, half a dozen pressures in this game, so it is what it is. But I do want to say on the offensive line, one note that will be relevant for next week, there was a lot of well, not a lot, but a couple of 7 offensive line sets with both Dan Skipper and Christian Mahogany coming into the game, not necessarily for goal line packages, just when they wanted to really beat the Niners up front and take advantage of the fact that the Niners played so much nickel and had 2 linebackers on the field a lot of the time. So just in general, including those sets and run blocking, what were your thoughts on the offensive line?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of issue with the offensive line, honestly. Like, the Bosa was the only guy that I was really noticing from San Francisco's
Mm-hmm.
standpoint on the defensive front, and he definitely had his way. He drew a hold on Sewell at one point, had a couple really good rushes against Decker, so he played a great game. Otherwise, yeah, they gave Goff plenty of time to throw. This was not a particularly high pressure game in terms of disrupting Goff or anything, so overall pretty pleased with the way the offensive line played in this game. And as a whole, it gave Goff the time that he needed. And I think one other note I wanted to get on Goff real quickly, because I was looking at the single season passer rating records. The top 20 has a couple guys that played not full seasons. So there was Tannehill from a few years back. I think 2019, he played 13 games. Foles is on the list from the Chip Kelly year when he played 12 or 13 games. We now have a 13-game sample for Goff dating back to the Seahawks game. In that time, 73.3% completion, 33 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 9.2 yards an attempt, 122.7 passer rating. Hard to beat that.
And
And the
yeah,
offensive line does deserve a lot of credit for that. They It hasn't been perfect, but they do give him time to work, and they gave him time to work in this game. But at the same time, Goff's ability to grow and survive even in the games where they've been wobbly has been a big story too. It's a tandem part. The Lions' offense is great because of its weapons. It's also great because of its quarterback. And this game, I think, really did show that in a lot of ways. It was a really strong showing from Goff, strong showing from the whole offense, honestly. There are very few negative notes I have on the offense in this game.
It also should be noted that in that 13 game stretch for Goff, 5 of those interceptions came in one game. So really good, really good. I guess my last note on the offense is I thought Sam Laporta had a really nice game, and not just as a receiver. I actually like going back over the film. I noted 3 or 4 really good blocking reps by him, just in run blocking. Did really good against some of the edge defenders on San Francisco and held his own against the defensive linemen somewhat. So, really encouraging to see a real complete game from Laporta, because I know going back to the start of the season in our preview, we had talked about the fact that Laporta was very up and down as a blocker in his rookie season, and that's one area that you want to see improve, because obviously his work as a receiver, it's kind of hard to question because he was so good in his rookie season. When called upon this year, he's also been very solid. So that was the next step of his game, and it's good to see those moments from him.
Yeah, I thought this was a really good Laporta game. My remaining notes on the offense, honestly, I thought Jameson Williams had another nice game.
Yep.
Didn't have a deep ball or anything outside of the hook and ladder, but continues to just show how good he's become in contested catches. Like he
Yep.
just makes a lot of catches when he's immediately contacted, when a guy's draped over him. And honestly, my thing is, if he's still going to have 4 or 5 easy drops over the course of a 17 game season. He's had about that this year. Some of them didn't count, but it's one every few games. I'm fine with that if he is this reliable in contested catch situations, right? You can live with
Yep.
a couple easy drops if he's going to be this good at this kind of thing, which was not necessarily the name of his game when he came out of college. He was supposed to be this deep downfield burner, just run him on a go route and throw it over the top, which he certainly can do, but he's progressed in many other ways. And it's been just a full evolution of his game. He is miles ahead of where he was last season when he was kind of still a gadget player. And I'm hoping they can get him over 1,000 this week against Minnesota. I'm not sure how far he is away. I think it's like 30 or 40 yards. So
33.
feels doable. 33, okay. Definitely doable, but we'll see. It would be nice if he got them all in one play. Wink, wink. But we will see. My other final notes: Allen Robinson had
Good to
a
see
fade
him.
in
Yeah.
very nearly the year of our Lord 2025. Allen Robinson fade. So Patrick, not super involved in this game, but he did have the 2 point conversion catch, so whatever. Again, it's just one of those stories with this offense where there's just not enough catches to go around. They gain so many yards and they give so many of it to their big 4 weapons. Montgomery, obviously, not healthy right now, but when you got 4 guys that have over 1,000 scrimmage yards, there's just not enough opportunity to feed all the mouths that you have, and so you get these games from Patrick where he's not catching any balls really, but the offense is putting up a gazillion yards, so it's not even like we need him to step up for the offense to get better. It's just the simple fact that they have so many weapons that a perfectly fine player like Tim Patrick can go a few weeks in a row without being involved, and there's completely no issue with that. And that's a pretty nice place to be in.
Yeah. And so to further that point, on the season right now, Amon-Ra St. Brown has 109 receptions, Sam Laporta 53, JMO 52, Gibbs 47. Like there could be 4 50 reception guys on this team, and Montgomery might have gotten there too if he was if he was healthy and able to play. Like for Patrick, he's gonna wind up. He's at 31 catches right now. He might get to 35, maybe, depending on how this last week goes. For a wide receiver 3 on a team where a running back and tight end are this, prominent in the offense, that's really good. That's really good and really impressive. So you can't really complain too much about Tim Patrick. And I mean, look, everyone in this offense has had down games this season where they just didn't get the ball because it wasn't for them. So not too much to worry about there. Very good day from.
I
Oh,
do
good.
Hey, I do want to quickly, before we move on from the offense, I want to get in a couple other sort of
Oh yeah, of
history
course.
or milestone notes. Because my biggest takeaway, honestly, from this game coming away was just like the Lions' defense is an issue, and we will get into that in depth in a moment. But if they are able to make the Super Bowl, it will be because they have one of the best offenses of all
Of all
time.
time.
Like
Yep.
just of all time. Like let's just be frank here. They've now played 16 games, which is a sample equivalent to the old NFL schedule, so we can look at some history. They're 11th all time in points scored in a season, and some of that is defense, some of that is special teams because they had some big games on that front, defensive touchdowns. Their yardage is closer to 25th all time on a per game basis, which is still really, really good, obviously. Um, and the craziest thing about their point scoring to me is you go back to those first three games. I mean, how many points did they leave on the field against Tampa Bay? I mean, like 20,
Yeah.
30, 25, something like that. I mean, that they lived in the red zone in that game and kicked field goals and turnovers. They left points on the field against Arizona. They left points on the field against the Rams. If they played all 16 games the way they've played these last 13, they would be third all time because over these past 13 games, they've been scoring at 36.2 points per game, which would be only behind in a 16 game season the '07 Pats and the '13 Broncos. So, yeah, it's really crazy what they've been doing. In the past 13 games, they've scored 23 points or more in all 13 games, 30 or more in 9 of 13 games, 40 or more in 6 of 13 games. They are just lighting it up and in a way that is really special. And we can talk about the defense, but as much as people should talk about can the Lions defense get the stops, they should also talk about can anyone in the NFC get stops against the Lions offense? Because it's an open question at this point in time. And progressing further, Lions PR Twitter account after the game was just lighting it up with some good history stats if you were following those. A few that I wrote down here. Only two teams in history have four players with 1,000 scrimmage yards and 7 touchdowns. The 2024 Lions and the 2004 Indianapolis Colts.
Mm.
And the Lions are the only team to do it with two running backs and two receivers in that category. Colts had one running back, Edgerrin James, and three receivers, Harrison, Wayne, and Stokely. Gibbs has 70 plus scrimmage yards in all 16 games for the first time in franchise history that any player has done that. There are two teams in history with 35 plus passing touchdowns and 25 plus rushing touchdowns in a season. The 24 Lions and the greatest show on turf Rams from 2000. Lions are now undefeated on the road for the first time in franchise history. Amon-Ra ties Calvin Johnson for most games with receiving touchdown in Lions history in a single season with 11. That's the 2011 Calvin season. Two quarterbacks in history have 8 games in a season of 75% or better completion. Goff and 2007 Tom Brady, maybe the greatest quarterback season of all time. And finally, Sam Laporta, one of four tight ends in history with 1,500 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns in his first 2 years in the league. Gronk, Jimmy Graham, and Mike Ditka in that category. Likely Brock Bowers to make it 5
Yeah.
next year, but really, really incredible stuff. And I think as we come into this playoff run, I mean, this game this week is essentially a playoff game. So um, it's worth remembering how special this group has been. And I wanted to just highlight not just the best Lions offense of my lifetime, but one of the greats there's ever been in the league. So really, really special stuff.
I think the most impressive the feat that this offense has achieved, honestly, is you're listing all these accolades that they've accomplished so far. And halfway through, I started losing track just because there's so many that it's genuinely hard to keep count of how many records they've broken, how historically great they've been. This is going to be a season and an offensive unit that we are going to look back on very fondly because it's we said it going into last offseason, there was all the, oh, Ben Johnson's going to leave and this offense is going to get worse. We managed to keep him another year. It's very unlikely that someone doesn't throw just as much money as they possibly can at him. Because honestly, like, Obviously this offense will be fine. The personnel is still there, and you are going to maintain some coaches that are going to be able to continue the offense at least at a relatively good clip next year. But man, this season with this combination of players and this offensive coordinator has been truly special, and it's been just amazing to watch. So absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, and I don't want to denigrate Ben Johnson or anything. I do think he's a smart guy, and he'll probably get a head coaching job. Hopefully, he does well. But I expect this to continue to chug along because these players are great, and
Mm-hmm.
I think in a lot of cases people kind of overrate how good or how important an offensive coordinator is to an offense. Like I think there are certainly cases where you get these Kyle Shanahan types that just year after year on different teams, no matter the players, churn out great offenses. Maybe Ben Johnson will be that. We'll see what he can do in other places. But, I just remember since we had a comparison to the greatest show on turf, Rams, Mike Martz, who was the coordinator of that, then he became the head coach after Dick Vermeil retired. And when he was coordinating or leading an offense with Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk and Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce, he looked like the greatest genius there ever was. And then years later, when he was the coordinator for the Detroit Lions under Rod Marinelli, coordinating for John Kitna, he didn't look as much of a genius. And so I wish Ben Johnson all the best, but great offenses are great offenses largely because of the talent and largely because of the players. And the Lions have exceptional players. And I fully believe that whoever comes in next will lead a good offense. Maybe not to this level. Maybe Ben Johnson is the best fit. He's done a great job. No question about that. But these players will still be there. And I expect them to continue to pile up yards and points for many seasons to come.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of evidence supporting that is look at what happened like in those early 2000 Rams when all those guys were there, and Kurt Warner goes down and Mark Bulger comes in and lights the
Yeah.
world on fire for a little bit, and then some of those guys leave, and suddenly he looks like, well, a pretty average to backup quarterback because, well, suddenly the talent's gone and he can't get carried by the likes of those veterans anymore. So well, we'll see what happens. I think the biggest difference you'll see next year, assuming Johnson does leave, is just the trick plays will be reduced a little bit, or they'll be a little bit less sicko in nature. Because Ben Johnson, for if there is one thing that he is fantastic at, it is creative trick plays and creative usage of personnel. So it'll be interesting to see how the next guy does, and we'll just have to wait. But for now, we have week 18 and at least one playoff game to enjoy this offense a little bit more. Now, more importantly, flipping over to the defense, because this is the unit that if they are able to elevate their game at all based on where they are right now, the Lions have a very good chance at going on a deep run again. Now, this defense has been picked apart for the last few weeks, and people are struggling to identify just how can this defense get a little bit better. Now, Alex, we've talked about this offline about this theory. The linebackers, who once again had a pretty brutal day against the Niners, especially Ben Neiman, Jack Campbell, Trevor Nowaski, all struggle in coverage. Nowaski also really struggled to set the edge in the run game. Jack Campbell might have been his worst game in coverage of the season. Ben Neiman, man, he's trying. He just does not have a natural feel for coverage at the linebacker position. What exactly is going wrong here, and how detrimental is bad linebacker play to a defense overall?
Yeah, the linebacker play has been terrible, and it really can destabilize everything, and it certainly has. Mostly in the past game, like there were some issues on the ground with them fitting the run, that kind of thing. But the biggest story of this game is just the Niners attacking over the middle of the field over and over and over again, and using play action really well. Which, okay, that can work some, but it can't work the amount it worked. It was almost every single snap. The linebackers with play action were sucking, 5, 6 yards down towards the line of scrimmage, completely vacating the middle, and it was working for George Kittle repeatedly. And Kyle Shanahan is a great offensive mind. He came up with a lot of good stuff to have Kittle open, as well, and to take advantage of that, but also just like digs and in-breaking routes to target the middle of the field where normally you could have linebackers in their zones, providing some resistance and some help to the corners. Instead, corners being left out to dry. I mean, they had a couple I think it was Pearsall where he just cut over the middle. No one there, just boom, right to him. And it was brutal. And I had a tweet around halftime of the game, sort of like, well, I think you can make a case that Malcolm Rodriguez was the most devastating injury that they suffered. And people were like, well, what about Hutchinson? I'm like, well, okay. I tweeted it with the assumption that we all understood that Hutchinson, being the probable DPOY if he was healthy, was the worst injury. But apart from Hutchinson, I think you can make that case because Rodriguez was playing really well.
Yep.
And after the Anzalone injury, I was sort of like, that sucks, but with the way Rodriguez is playing, they can get by until Anzalone's back. And I think he get hurt in the Bears game, if I remember correctly.
I think
And
so, yeah.
and earlier in that game, remember how he covered that wheel route to DeAndre Swift? I mean,
Yep.
just played it perfectly. And he was making plays like that. And I think the biggest thing, obviously, McNeil's the other guy you bring up, but I almost feel like the gap between McNeil and Levi, or whoever you want to say is playing some more in his stead, is not as big of a gap as the drop off with Rodriguez to some of these guys, because these Niemans and Nowaskis, they're just not NFL players. And the drop off there is humongous. And it feels like it's destabilized Jack Campbell as well. He has been less steady, less sure of himself, which I think you can understand to some degree when you don't really know what your partner is doing at all. And it's just really brutal. And I don't know if Anzalone will be back this week. If not, probably the next week is what it sounds like. They need him back desperately. And that will be just a game changer because everything that's going wrong is being exploited in that spot of the field right now. And you get Anzalone back, you'll still have issues on the DL. You'll still miss Carlton Davis, but you'll have plugged the biggest hole.
Yeah, and I should have also mentioned Jalen Reeves-Maybin is also a part of that linebacker group. He
Yeah.
had a couple of tough moments in this game. He had one man coverage rep against Isaiah Garendo or Isaac Grendo, sorry, where on a wheel route, he just stops his feet for half a second and Grendo takes off over the top. Purdy makes a great throw under pressure. There was another instance in which Reeves-Maybin was the only defender to snuff out a screen, but he missed the tackle, which led to a 10-yard gain. So also not a good game from him. Jack Campbell, this is the Carlton Davis. Everything was happening for him in this game. He had a couple of nice run fits, but I had him pegged with the most negative events defensively in this game. He had a really tough time diagnosing the play action passes and what to do with it. Neiman too is obviously guilty of that. And one thing that you pointed out offline that we should bring up is the Lions adjusted in the second half of this game, and that's kind of what led to their improvement in the second half. Obviously, they get the turnovers, but they did a much better job containing the passing attack because they went away from their cover three and they leaned a lot more on their man coverage with Arnold and Robertson on the outside. Branch played a lot more in the nickel this game. So just go ahead and break down the adjustments the Lions made with their defensive looks.
Well, I just kind of noticed this. I wasn't setting out to track like their coverages. I was really looking at just individual charting for the individual players on each play, but it definitely seemed to me, and I'd have to probably go back a third time and just chart man versus zone, but it seemed like early on in this game they were playing a lot more zone. I mean, you always have your linebackers for the most part in zone drops over the middle. Sometimes they'll cover a guy on a wheel, but like the JRM play with Garendo on the wheel route, that was a zone snap. He was not in man there. He had to pick him up, and then at that point he was toast. But it seemed like the first half of the game they were predominantly in zone, and they really weren't getting a lot of results with it. They weren't really covering anybody. And in the second half, and they weren't blitzing like a crazy amount either in that first half. And then in the second half, they finally get some sacks because they start blitzing a little more. They have some plays where they get a few free rushers and they can bring Purdy down. And I would like to see a Lions defense with more zone, but you got to rep it. You got to get it, drill it down in the summer and through the fall. It's too late for that now. I feel like the playbook that we saw in the second half was more similar to the playbook they did last year. We've talked about it in the past as what they probably have to do, which is just throw weird blitzes at them, man up, hope that you don't get burned. You'll probably get burned some, but you live with it. Hope to get some explosives in your direction with turnovers and things of that nature. And they started to get that in the second half, and Purdy made a couple mistakes. And it just felt more like, okay, this is something that they're a little more familiar with and feels more viable than to just sort of drop into soft zones and try to bend, not break, because they just weren't really getting any results from that I could see in this game.
Yeah, you got to play to win. And look, the the difference between last year's defense and this year's defense is the problems with the team are in reverse. Last year they had a good front seven that stopped the run and forced you to pass, but they had no secondary. They did not have anyone that could cover. And the result of that is, well, you get to the NFC Championship game, you're up 24-7, and suddenly the opponent has to pass a bunch, and it works because you don't have anyone that can cover. Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. Well, Branch was playing exclusively nickel at that point. Kirby Joseph did not have as good of a season last year, obviously, bit of a sophomore slump. This year, the secondary is playing a lot better. Kirby Joseph is the best ball hawk in the league. He is leading the league in interceptions with 9, 2 ahead of anyone else. Brian Branch has been a little up and down this season. He was really good in the first few weeks, kind of come back down to earth lately. Hopefully, you can get a bit of a spark from him down the stretch. Melifonwu, he's been okay. He's been okay, but the service that he provides, allowing you to put Amik Robertson on the outside and push Branch down to nickel again, has worked tremendously because Terrion Arnold and Amik Robertson have played pretty well overall at outside corner. Terrion, a bit of an eventful game. Obviously had the skirmishes with Juwan Jennings throughout, but I thought Terrion had a fine game overall. It wasn't his best, but a fine game. Robertson, I think, has been pretty solid as well. Like it's not perfect, but you're getting better play than you did from your corners at this time last season. So I don't want to complain too much. It's just you got to lean into the fact that you have Kirby and presumably Branch who can generate turnovers at a high rate. You just need something to click here.
Yeah, I think you can make a case that some of the issues with play action in part are the Lions linebackers just being a little over aggressive and feeling like they need to help out the
Yeah.
defensive line in run defense, which is again a difference from last year where you were able to lean on the defensive line as a strength. Kirby Joseph, I think, is deserves recognition just as a guy who's been a rock all year. You've had a really choppy season with so many injuries. You've had Brian Branch, who I think has been a bit disappointing in the second half. He's had some issues, which I don't know if there's a lingering injury, which is certainly possible, but just not quite as sharp in the second half. Really, up to the Houston game, he was playing like probably the best safety in the NFL. And the last little bit, he's been pretty middling in my opinion. I thought he was okay in this game. Got beaten coverage a couple times, but mostly he had good coverage, and it was just a good throw. But he's had a couple like dumb penalties, including one in this game. It just his impact hasn't been as palpable as it was in the first half of the season. And you've had Campbell, who's had to deal with some ups and downs with the guys next to him. It's just been a really choppy year for almost everyone on this defense, except Kirby Joseph, who has been awesome wire to wire. That first game, he has interception of Stafford in the end zone. This game, 16 weeks later, has 2 interceptions. He's just been awesome, and he's going to be all pro, I would assume. Some reason not in the Pro Bowl, but Mitch Trubisky was in a Pro Bowl, which tells you all you need to know about that event. So,
Yeah, man.
um, NFL leader in interception, he'll have to settle for that. And your points about the other DBs, Robertson, I think's played pretty well the last few
Mm-hmm.
weeks. I haven't noticed him in any negative way. He's had some nice sticks in run defense, and Tyrion's gotten to the point where he has like one play he gives up a game, basically like one catch, and then occasionally we still see some DPIs here and there, but he's improved. I was looking at the PFF grades, I think since I don't remember what week it was, like week 7 or something like that. He's at about a 60 grade, which is average. I think that's been fine. And he's been average as a rookie, covering really good receivers, almost purely in man for a lot of the year. I think as a whole, where he is now is fine. And I think
Yeah.
it's kind of like a Jack Campbell arc where you expect a big step forward next year, and hopefully he takes it. But between him and Robertson, you have two solid, okay, outside corners. Branch, you expect to give you solid, okay play, hopefully better if he can get back in a groove. But your safeties have been pretty good between Melifonwu and then obviously the great Joseph. It's an okay secondary, but you
Mhm.
need those linebackers back, and you just got to hope you can get anything you can out of that defensive line.
I should mention the big play that Terrion gives up in this game. What a brutal combination of an awful defensive rep and just a great play call by Shanahan in that offense. Because basically the Niners come out with a tight bunch and the Lions are in man, and it's a wheel route for that Arnold has to defend and a crossing route that Brian Branch is defending, and they just run into each other. And that causes Terrion obviously to lose a step, and he gets really far behind Ricky Pearsall. Credit to Terrion for recovering to make the tackle to save the touchdown, but yeah, that was just a brutal watch on replay.
Yeah, that's a great rub route. Beautiful concept. And again, I thought Shanny had a lot of really good stuff in this game. They had Kittle on a couple different like tight end delay, tight end leak kind of plays that were crafty, and their reverses. They ran the one to Debo that was pretty good. Like even when the talent isn't there, he's always going to have his best stuff. He's always going to be smart. He's always going to provide really good offensive coaching. And Purdy was healthy for 95% of this game until the ending, and they still have Kittle. And we talked about this last week, right? Like they still have good players, and they were able to have quite a bit of success. But the Lions in the second half were able to ramp it up a bit, and Joseph made some plays, and that ended the interception drought, which we
Yep.
had kind of talked about. So gets them back in the groove heading into next week, where Darnold definitely, as well as he's played, has the potential to toss up a couple pizzas that you can snag, and hopefully they can keep that going because they'll probably need a couple takeaways.
Yeah, and Kirby, just a hilarious game. Brian Branch takes a defensive pass interference penalty on a play. He knocks Kittle to the ground, and on that play, Kirby Joseph intercepts the ball in the air, and obviously gets called back. The very next snap, just a gift from Purdy over the head of, I believe it was Pearsall, and Robertson had great coverage on that play, and it just falls into the lap of Kirby. And then the one later in the game was obviously a much more impressive play where Joseph just jumps the route perfectly, and it's very similar to the one he had against Mason Rudolph against Tennessee, where he it's just a bait, and Joseph, the second he lines up on that route, it's an interception. He knows it, and it's a game-changing play, and that sets up I believe that sets up the Gibbs 30-yard run to ice it at the end. So, I mean, just an absolute game record that Kirby has developed into. It's the third year in a row that he has had at least one multi-interception game, which I don't care if you're into ESPN stats or not. That's kind of cool that he's capable of producing these multi-turnover games, and we'll see if he can deliver another one. And even if he doesn't, his range is going to be so desperately needed in this game because the Vikings love to throw the ball deep. They have these uh, great receivers. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is one of the two best in the league. Like if you want to give it to Jamar Chase this year, that's fine. Then Jefferson's the two, and Jordan Addison also a very good threat. I also want to mention Kirby had this play didn't count either on the boneheaded offside by DJ Reader, where at the end of a quarter, the Niners ended up snapping it. The play gets blown dead, but two players are playing that like it counts. Jawan Jennings and Kirby Joseph, and Joseph sprints probably 20 yards to break up that pass to Jennings, which again doesn't count, but was pretty impressive display of his range as well. So outstanding player, should have been on the Pro Bowl, probably will be an All Pro. He's on the Amon-Ra St. Brown track from last year. And yeah, aside from that, did you have any defensive line notes that you wanted to mention in this game, or any other defensive notes?
Not really. The Niners just didn't run the ball very much
No.
in this game, and when they did, they ran to the outside. It was
Yeah.
especially early on. It was run to the perimeter, throw over the middle, over and over again. there were definitely the thing about pass rush is outside of situations where you're able to get sacks because your coverage is pretty good, and situations where your pass rush is getting home 1 second after the snap every single play because it's AJR Curry trying to block Aiden Hutchinson. Outside of those situations, pass rush is actually a kind of hard thing to assess live because you're watching the ball and you're naturally going to follow wherever the ball's going. And if the ball's going out before there's sacks, you're going to be like, where's the pass rush? But
Mhm.
then you go back and you watch the tape and you're like, wow, this play, a half second more, they would have gotten home. And there were definitely plays on rewatch where that was the case. I thought Levi Onwuzurike had a couple rushes. He had some bull rushes from the outside, but the Niners had anything they wanted open for 3/4 of this game over the middle of the field. So couldn't really get a big read on what could have happened. Finally, they get the free rushers from blitzes later, and that blows plays up. But organic rush, not great, but there would have been better opportunities with better coverage behind it, as is always the case. My other note: the reserve DL didn't honestly play that much. I think someone gave me the snap counts. It wasn't very high for like the Miles Adams and O'Connor types, but it felt more because when they were out there, they were bad, and it
Yeah.
was pretty noticeable. So I'm not sure that's new news, but it is a story of this game.
The duo when they were out there of Chris Smith and Pat O'Connor, woof. That
Yeah,
yeah, it was not pretty. Chris Smith, I believe is the backup nose tackle right now behind DJ Reader, so he'll play probably 6 or 7 snaps a game, maybe. Pat O'Connor played a little bit more. He was filling in for Levi at 3 tech whenever Levi kicked out to the outside to fill in at edge. It look, they're just depleted. That's really the only story there. They're just very depleted, and it's an unfortunate casualty of injuries. I will say for the pressure, I know that myself and many other Lions fans were concerned at halftime or nearing halftime when someone had tweeted out that the Lions had zero pressures. It's because Purdy had got the ball out in 2.5 seconds or less pretty much every single time. There was like the Garendo one, for example, the wheel route that we keep going back to. Purdy was about to get hit, and he just kind of throws it a little off platform, and it's just a beautiful throw. I tweeted out a Levi bull rush from the 3 tech spot in which Purdy it's just out so quickly that Levi doesn't even have a chance to disrupt the throw. So I'm not as concerned about the pass rush. Obviously, the Niners have a backup O line in this game. You wish you could have a 6 sack performance. It's just not going to work like that when you don't cover as well as you need to. So I'm not really too concerned about that. We'll see. The Vikings have a better offensive line, and they also have some of those Shanahan-esque schemes. They just have a little bit of a different take on it, a little bit less play action, more drop back, and like pure drop backs. So we'll see how that. We'll preview that later. But the pass rush, just kind of okay. But that's what you expect when you're so beat up and you're missing the defensive player of the year and Ali McNeil on the interior as well.
yeah, it is what it is. They showed the graphic at the start of the game about, just like the all injured defense from the Lions, and they lined them up at the different positions. It's a remarkable story. Injuries are a part of football, yes, but the number the Lions have had concentrated at this side of the
Yep.
ball is pretty remarkable. But they just keep trudging forward. They had a pretty cataclysmic defense a few weeks back against the Packers. We were hoping they would get all the guys back, and then some came back, and then some got hurt again. And we're back in this spot. But the important note there is they still beat the Packers in that game,
Yep.
and they have defied the odds, and they're in a situation now where 3 wins at home gets them to the Super Bowl. And maybe the combination of being at home and having an all-time offense is enough, and they get just enough stops. It's certainly possible. That's why you play the games.
Yep. And worst case, the Lions did go undefeated on the road this season. So
Yep.
probably shouldn't be too worried about that either, honestly. Like the fact of the matter is there's going to be a 14-win wildcard team. That is a literally a first in the NFL. It's a very unusual anomaly. And you shouldn't be shocked if no matter who wins this game between the Lions and Vikings, you probably should not be shocked if there is a third matchup in the near future as well. Now, is there any last defensive notes, or can I flip over to special teams and game theory?
Nope. Go ahead.
All right, so special teams, this will be quick. Jake Bates has a bit of a weird game. He hits from 57, and I think the other one, did he have another 50-yarder, or was it 40 something?
I had him down for 57 and 42.
Yeah, and so he hits those two kicks, and he hits two of his extra points. He misses an extra point, and then he has an extra point blocked on what should have been a flag for blowing up the long snapper on the
Yeah,
play. Bit of a weird one.
that
Now,
was yeah. I was like, "Where's?" I thought you couldn't like rough the snapper, but I don't know. I'm not up on that, so I'm not saying they obviously blew it, but I thought you weren't allowed to do that.
I will say, like, long snappers are kind of allowed to get away with holding every field goal, so I'm okay if they're in play. Like, I don't have a problem with it. It's just the fact that it is in the rule book that you can't. I'm not going to make too much of a complaint about that. The missed extra point, meh. We've talked about this with Bates. If he's hitting 95% of his kicks, I'd rather the misses be extra points rather than field goals. So I don't know. Like, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, not the end of the world. It is what it is. He's made clutch kicks. He's made long kicks. Big
Yep.
one in this game in particular. So whatever. The
Yep.
bigger story for me on special teams is the unfortunate meltdown of Jake Moody's NFL career. It's been a struggle for him this year, dating back to really the missed field goal in the NFC Championship game. And I know he's had injuries and stuff, but it's getting to the point where I just don't know if you can put him on the field. And you just wonder if he'll be back with the Niners, which sucks, but also shows the peril in ever drafting a kicker because Jake Moody was the best kicker Michigan ever had until maybe the current guy, but he was unbelievable at Michigan, won all the awards, and now can't be trusted to make routine kicks. And then the Lions have a guy who never kicked field goals in college, and he's pretty darn good. So I don't know. It's a more mysterious position than even goaltending in hockey, which is saying something.
I don't know. I think Jake Moody is just staying true to being a Lions fan, which you have to respect.
There you
Um,
go.
but yeah, look, Moody had a terrible game, and he being a third round pick in 2023, you just have to wonder. It was obviously a poor decision to draft a kicker that high, but I don't think anyone could have foreseen him being this bad in his second season. He is just way too many misses. Even Justin Tucker is having a terrible year. So I think maybe the kicking world is just a little upside down this season. And we know that kickers can flip on a dime. So who knows? Maybe Jake Bates will be terrible next year. We have no idea. There's no way to know. But we can only evaluate the tape that we have. And Jake Bates, so far so good. Sorry for Jake Moody, but someone will take a chance on him. There's no way that no one will take a chance if he does get cut. So we'll just have to wait and see. Aside from that, Alex, what do you have for game theory?
Uh, I actually want to get one sort of, well, honestly, one special teams note.
Okay.
The really weird kickoff return fumble by San Francisco that
Oh,
was very, very
almost.
close to disaster.
Woo! Yeah, that could have been real bad.
Yeah, thankfully the knee was, I guess, down by contact. Which okay then. My one ref talk note: the first touchdown that San Francisco scored with Pearsall, he hits the ground and the ball bounces up out of his hands and back into his hands. And I guess they said he had, possession established before he went to the ground. I didn't really see that. I don't really understand why he didn't have to survive the ground on that one, but whatever. Didn't really get talked about much beyond that. As for game theory stuff, first game theory thing is I'm perfectly fine with the Kirby Joseph personal foul
Oh,
on the Terrion Arnold Juwan Jennings fight. Like,
yeah. Back up your guy.
yeah, we don't have these conversations much in football the way we do in hockey with like the sort of theory of the game and
The
how you
code.
manage the code and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you got your rookie corner getting beat up by this guy, and I just generally assume even if Kirby doesn't do that, that it's still probably a uh, offsetting personal fouls, just because that's how they generally call that stuff. So I don't really think he cost the Lions yards. But even if he did, I'm still in favor of it. Like, stand up for your guy.
Mm.
You need to assert yourself early in a game. This is a sort of rival team in the sense that they humiliatingly ended your season last year. Like, go fight for your guys. And so it's early in a game, set the tone. I got no issue with that.
Yeah, no.
Beyond, yeah, if do you have a take on that?
No, not really. I mean, like you said, if they didn't flag Kirby for it, if he doesn't do that, they're going to flag Terry on for slapping back. So,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what I did laugh at Juwan Jennings after the game, being like, a little tough guy act, being like, I give him what he asked for, kind of thing. It's like, dude, you lost.
Yeah.
Uh,
So beyond that, they have 3 fourth downs that they go for in this game. They have let's see, a 4th and 2.5 is how I marked it down in the late second quarter in the goal line situation at the San Francisco 8-yard line. They go for it, do not get it. I'm fine going with that. It felt like at that point of the game, it wasn't clear San Francisco was going to get any stop, or they were going to stop San Francisco at all. So I was fine going there rather than kicking field goals. Just didn't feel like field goals were going to win you this game. Did you disagree with that one?
no, go for it. Yes. Jump ball. No.
Fair enough. Then they have a 4th and goal at the 4-yard line late third quarter while they are trailing 28-24. I was on the fence about this one because by this point in the game, they had just gotten a stop of San Francisco with an interception. My only thought about this was that kicking a field goal would turn it into a one-score game, right? Down 28-27. You're still in a situation where you can get a touchdown and tie. So I was a little closer to on the fence, but they do go for it. And thankfully for them, no one covers Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he walks into the end zone. So I could go either way on that one.
It's- yeah, it's a tricky one because, uh, as we saw later in the game, the Lions ended up struggling to finish drives, and so that touchdown becomes pivotal at the end, and the field goals are what followed. I think you kind of have to go for it anytime you're inside the 5 because you don't want to run the risk that you won't get back there. And obviously, for as good as this Lions offense is, they are still susceptible to being stopped and having to either kick field goals. They didn't punt in this game, but they can still be stopped. They are not unbeatable. And so I think in general, unless you have the lead already, unless like when you're inside the 5, you got to go.
Yeah, these were interesting ones. Like because the next one I have down is 4th and 3 at the plus 45, early fourth quarter, leading 31-28. Again, I was kind of on the fence, but I did lean going for it.
Mm,
Just because your offense had been so dominant and you're not that far away from getting more points, but at the same time, I could see a kick there. They end up going for it and they get it. They end up getting a field goal off the drive. And so, in the end, even though I thought this was a kind of a tricky game for fourth down decision making, certainly the last two, they come out -4 on the first one, they come out +4 on the second one, and they come out +3 on the third one. So in the end, they're +3 for the game. That wasn't the final margin, but it was very important in a six
yeah.
point game. So again, you as long as you come out ahead, that's what we always talk about is even if you get stopped and you come out with some fourth downs you didn't get, as long as you come out ahead for the entirety of the game, then you got it right, and they did.
Yeah, my only gripe with that line of thinking is that you run the like you could get into a situation where you in a vacuum agree with every fourth down decision, but if you go 0 for 5, you're going to be like, well, then why'd you keep going for it if you're not getting it? Like, I think you kind of just have to take every situation as in a vacuum, would you go for it in general, yes or no? In general, I'm good with them, and if they hadn't have gotten them, like I would want to look at them as even if they didn't get it, would you have gone for it still? Like that's how I want to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I remember last year there was a game between Washington and Oregon in college football where
Mm.
Oregon went for it 4 or 5 times, a lot of them in the red zone. and they just came out empty on like all of them and lost on a last-second field goal. And it when you come up unlucky or repeatedly, then it can really create those situations where you can kind of second guess yourself. And at the end of the day, though, I think that when you have this caliber of offense, when you're on the fence as they could have been in some of those situations, I think you just roll the dice because you believe your offense is going to win out, and generally they do.
Yeah. So aside from that, do you have any final thoughts on this game?
Um, my only thought is just a general takeaway, but I think that Joe Buck has improved more than any broadcaster I've ever seen, and part of that may be the fact that he was, before Noah Eagle, the ultimate Nepo baby in a field dominated by them, that
Mm,
he was allowed to start a professional primetime national audience career while being honestly bad at broadcasting. Like, go back to the mid 2000s, like, listen to his call of the Giants Patriots Super Bowl in '07. It was brutal stuff, man. Like he was not reactive at all, was not expressive. He was bad, and he has gotten a lot better. Which again, he was allowed to get better because he was allowed to start at a worse spot than anybody else. But now I think he might be the best guy in the NFL doing the games. I really enjoy listening to him. Aikman can, take it or leave it, but
mm.
Buck has really just grown a lot. And like I've seen him now on some interviews where he's got so much more personality than he used to have. Like I think the turning point for me was, do you remember the thing during the pandemic when like a porn site offered him $1 million to broadcast play by play, and he came back with like just a hilarious like self-deprecating tweet about it, and I was like, wow, like Joe Buck has personality. Like this is genuinely funny. And since then, every time I've seen him off air, he's shown way more personality, and I've just really come to enjoy him. And him and Aikman have started to have some, real camaraderie and just the jokes they laugh at. And I remember like a week ago, Buck had a great analysis of like the playoff, college football playoff decision making, and just like I'm just amazed that this guy who was like this non-expressive, just sort of husk of a robotic human has become someone I really, really look forward to listening to. So shout out to Joe Buck for that.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think Fox is doing the Super Bowl this year, I believe. So I don't know if Joe Buck will be on the call for that one, but
No, he's ABC nowadays,
yeah.
so
So
that'll be Burkhart, I think. Who's okay.
yeah.
Brady is the bigger issue with Fox nowadays, but we don't need to get into that one.
So yeah, yeah, aside from that, I mean, good to get revenge on the Niners, even though the game means nothing. We'll get into the game that means literally everything in a little bit. But real quick, usually we take this time to recap around the league. But this is a little bit different because we're heading into the final week. So we're going to recap how every team that is still alive in the race is doing. Before then, I guess we can also mention the New England Patriots are currently the leaders in the Tank Bowl. If they lose, they get the first overall pick. If they win, then it opens the doors again. Shout out to Drew Lock for ruining the Giants tank last week, by the way. Just an absolute legacy performance by Drew Lock to just on the same week that Saquon hits 2,000 yards, which is also very noteworthy. What a bad week to be a Giants fan.
Yeah, the Giants are so funny to me. They're kind of like the football Miami Marlins, where
Mm,
not as bad, but it's like for a large chunk of my lifetime now, the Giants have been one of the biggest laughing stocks in the sport. Yes, yet they also have two Super Bowl rings in my lifetime. And it's just like how is this the case that this team has two rings? But you can't say their fans are tortured as a result, but what a brutal last like 10 years for that franchise. And I guess the one consolation is that I don't really know how much dropping from 1 to 5 really changes their calculus in the draft. Like the biggest thing is, oh, they can't get a quarterback. I don't think this is a draft. You should be drafting a quarterback top 5, but that's just me. So they'll still have the ability to get a really good player if it's not a quarterback. I guess if they are so dead set on Shador, they have to trade up or something. I don't know. this is a year where I would be looking to find the Aiden Hutchinson and not, talking myself into Kenny Pickett or whatever.
I don't know if you've seen them, if anyone has seen the movie Draft Day, but I saw a
Yeah.
post that this draft is basically the plot of that movie, where Shador is basically Bo Callahan, Genty is basically Ray Jennings, and right, like the was Abdul Carter is basically Vontae Mack. Like we could, if
Yeah.
the Browns trade up, all hell is gonna break loose, and that theory is gonna be hilarious. But yeah, gonna be a very interesting draft cycle because it's if the Patriots have the number one pick, you would think they go Travis Hunter, but I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Um, Aside from that, getting to teams that are actually good and actually relevant, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now basically run the NFC South. Barring a epic collapse, they are going to win that division. The only question is, will they be the 3 seed or the 4 seed? The Rams are resting Matthew Stafford, so if the Bucks win this week, they clinch the NFC South and will be the 3 seed and will take on the Green Bay Packers. If the and the Rams lose, I should say. If the Rams win, then the Bucks would host the winner or the loser, sorry, of Detroit, Minnesota. Uh, Not a team that I think anyone should want to play right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bucks and the Rams are both fairly dangerous teams. They're
Mm-hmm.
teams that do not have good defenses in any way, shape, or form, but they have veteran QBs who can really sling it and high scoring offenses, great receiver talent. So I don't really necessarily think, to me, that there's a big uh, difference at this point in time between which one you play. Like you can take your pick. They're both dangerous teams. Uh, I guess the Rams maybe are trying to back in to face the Vikings because they beat them already this year. But
I mean,
um,
look, if you're the Rams, you have to look at Minnesota and Detroit and say, look, we beat Minnesota and we probably should have beat Detroit in week 1. You feel good about that. If you're the Bucks, you already beat Detroit. Why
yeah,
can't you beat Minnesota?
yeah. And by the way, I think you might have gotten the seating wrong with the
Probably.
Commanders. By the way, Commanders are the
Right. Yeah.
they control their own destiny for 6. So that's actually a pretty interesting wrinkle to this story. If Washington beats Dallas, they will be 6,
6.
and
Yeah.
Green Bay will be 7. And
Oh,
personally, I am very much rooting for Green Bay against Philadelphia. I think there are 4 complete-ish teams, although Packers are on fraud watch after what we just witnessed. And I would enjoy 2 of those 4 complete teams playing each other in the first game so that one of them gets sent home very early. But that's also, if the Packers are going to give us no help and the one time we need them to win, they lay an egg, go to Philly, get blasted. I will laugh at the Schadenfreude, what
I'm
what they deserve.
You know what though? The 7 seed Packers last year were absolutely lethal and destroyed the Cowboys. So I'm actually maybe they have a chance. Who knows? That maybe Jordan Love has another legacy game against the Eagles and they avenge that week 1 loss. That yeah, so the Commanders, I mean, they did beat the Eagles without Jalen Hurts, so that'll be interesting to watch as well. But yeah, very, very interesting here as we get to the end of the season. Other notes, I do want to, I did mention it briefly, but Saquon hits 2,000 yards. Very impressive. Very great year for Saquon. He is the engine of that Eagles offense. Considering their passing attack is very bipolar, depending on what Jalen Hurts feels like doing any given week. So good for him. He really should be an MVP consideration.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because they are resting Saquon, is my understanding, this
Yeah.
coming week.
So no record.
Just Yeah, weird that they are resting him after the way they ran him into the ground in that game. I mean, that second, third quarter, every single time I saw anything from that game, he was carrying the ball. I mean, he ran it 31 times in a game that was completely meaningless. So they played with fire in week 17 and now are taking the off ramp on week 18. But Saquon's a great player. My thing on the Eagles, back to your point, if I'm the Eagles, I am cheering for Dallas to beat Washington because I will
Mm,
gladly take my chances with Washington versus having to play Green Bay. I mean, it's at the same time, it's a tough matchup for the Packers. It's a tough matchup for the Eagles. So I will be very interested in that matchup if it comes to fruition. I hope it does. I hope they play the playoff game if it happens, not on a slip and slide like they did in that Brazil game
Yeah.
to start the year. But
So,
it is Philadelphia is outdoors. It is cold.
yep.
We played one of the great snow games of all time against them 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 12 years, whatever that, long time ago.
An amount of years
Uh,
ago.
it was 11, but now technically 2025 it's 12. But whatever. You never know what could happen outdoors in Philly in the winter. So maybe it will be a terrible weather game.
Yeah, and honestly, look, the reason that I really, really want the Lions to get the 1 seed, aside from getting healthy and getting home field advantage to the playoffs, obviously, just as a fan of football in general, the NFC first round, like the wild card round, is going to be amazing. If let's say the matchups stick, let's say you have Eagles Packers, Rams Commanders, Bucks Vikings. Is there a single bad matchup there?
No, not really. I mean, it's the AFC where, we have the potential of some games that the NFL is going to have to hide on Prime Video in that first weekend. But the NFC matchups will be really good, and there's really nothing better in sports, I feel like, than when your team has advanced to the next round and you just get to sit and feast on the playoff matchups that don't affect you because you're already through. So I would very much enjoy a wild card week with a bye week.
Yeah, and touching on the AFC quickly, that final wild card spot still up for grabs. The Broncos control their own destiny. If they beat the Chiefs, they're in. They get that final wild card spot. If they lose, Miami is able to claim it with a win over who does Miami even play? They play the Jets, and I don't believe is going to be playing in that game. So if the Broncos and Dolphins both lose, the Bengals can sneak in, and Joe Burrow would, I mean, he's probably the actual MVP of this season because where would that Bengals team be without him right now? They are probably the most dangerous of the potential 7 seed there because they are the only team that can actually do anything in the playoffs should they get there. The Broncos, they're fun, they're pretty good, but I don't think anyone in their right mind would pick them over the Bills. And same with the Dolphins. Like that would be a slaughter if it was the Dolphins. So I kind
Yeah,
of, as a fan, I'm kind of cheering for the Bengals, but as someone who is very sympathetic to the Broncos, I do want them to end their playoff streak as well.
yeah. I am cheering for the Broncos. I think just because it would be nice to see them in the playoffs. I mean, they haven't made it since the Super Bowl, right? The
Since
one they won.
2015. Yep.
Yeah, geez, wow. So that would be nice to see. Although, as you mentioned, they don't really have a logical shot against the Bills on the road. Um, so from an entertainment standpoint, probably the Bengals. But as it looks right now, the worst outcome is the Dolphins in that playoff spot,
Yeah.
playing playing an outdoor playoff game in Buffalo. Like, don't even the game is over before it starts in that situation. And we still have the potential for coughing baby versus coughing baby, Steelers Texans. And so AFC has some potentially ugly playoff matchups, which I hope we don't get, but it is what it is. It was a shame I didn't get to see that Bengals Broncos game, but by all accounts, it was a really interesting game,
hmm
and so again, it'd be nice to see the Bengals in it, but they probably won't because the Chiefs are resting Mahomes, I believe. It's Carson Wentz playing,
Yep.
so if
Which
the Broncos can't win that one, then I don't know what to say.
that's a very interesting note before we get into Lions topics again. The Chiefs played on Christmas Day last Wednesday. This episode's coming out on Friday the 3rd. So it has been basically a week and a half since the Chiefs have played football. They are resting their starters on Sunday, and they have the first round bye. Their starters are basically going to go a month without playing meaningful football. So that could be a recipe for disaster. It could be a recipe for a guaranteed three-peat. I have no idea. Maybe dark magic will just take over once again because nothing really matters. But just I don't know. What are your takes on resting their starters that long?
It's dangerous. I think it's definitely dangerous. I think we've seen There's definitely there's two mindsets. There's the like we need the rest, we need our honestly for the Lions standpoint, if this game against the Vikings didn't matter, then I would rest the guys just because of the injury. It's like the you can't take on any more water. But with a reasonably healthy team like last year, we've seen Dan Campbell, we've seen guys like Jim Harbaugh and other real football men who don't believe in weeks off, who don't believe in that kind of thing, who think getting out of the rhythm, the rust, all that factor can be a big deal. And we've certainly seen over the years plenty of teams that got the first round bye come out and look bad. Packers did it a couple times and got upset in stunning fashion in Lambeau. It happened to Peyton and the Colts a few times back in the day. So it's definitely a storyline, but at the same time, the Patriots generally under Brady almost always had a bye and didn't get upset that often. The Chiefs haven't. So I don't know. I feel like they know what they're doing. You're tempting fate with that long of a layoff, definitely, but I don't view it as detrimental as I do in baseball, where
Mm.
the game is such an everyday rhythm, day in day out thing that we've seen those weeks off before a World Series or in the last few years, some of the resting before the ALDS, if you get that bye through the wild card round, can be pretty awful for your hitting, and it just gets you out of rhythm. Football, I don't think is as bad, but it's a consideration. Then again, it's the Chiefs. They're great champions. They know what they're doing. I trust they have made the right calculation.
Yeah. And now, as we wrap up the show, the final topic, all that really matters, Lions versus Vikings for all the marbles. We're going to tie in the Vikings and Packers recap into this because it is directly relevant because the Vikings, what they did to the Packers and the Packers soft zone, they will try to do to the Lions defense as well. And obviously, the Vikings defense has been hailed all season. Brian Flores' unit as one of the best. We have been critical of it all year. And this is going to be the matchup of matchups, as good as it gets in the regular season. Two 14-win teams vying for the division championship and the number one seed. Everything on the line. Alex, what did the Vikings do to the Packers? A, that scares you for this matchup, and B, that gives you optimism for this matchup.
Well, what scares me about the Vikings is they've got a really good quarterback. Like, let's just be honest here. And some of the discourse around Sam Darnold has been driving me crazy the last little bit. He's played awesome this year. Like, he has a couple of moments in the course of a game where he stares a guy down and throws one up. And he had a bad interception in this game. I thought the Vikings in general played too aggressively with a lead and kind of invited the Packers back in the game a little bit. But that's almost more game theory than it is Darnold. He's not perfect, but he's been really, really good this year. And this is not just a guy being carried by weapons, in my opinion. Like, he is making high level, precise throws, and he's not that old. I still like JJ McCarthy. I believe in JJ McCarthy developing sometime down the road. But right now, Darnold's got to be their guy going forward. Like, this is crazy to me to talk about, like, oh, they should maybe tag him and trade him or let him walk or whatever. Like, this guy is 26, 27 years old and has got a 100 passer rating and 30 some touchdowns and led your team to 14 wins. Like, this guy is the guy you build around right now to me. Keep JJ because he's on a rookie contract and maybe someday he will progress better. But I don't know why everyone is assuming that JJ McCarthy is a rookie is going to be better than Sam Darnold is right now. Like, that's crazy to me. If if you are going with uh, if you're going with McCarthy next year, you are more than likely assuming a significant step backwards in your play and as a team because Darnold is playing really well and he played pretty well in the game that we faced him and he's playing well now. He was 33 of 43 in this game for 377, three touchdowns, one pick. He stretches the field vertically. He throws a lot of balls that draw DPI as well. The Vikings get a lot of that, which is going to be a concern for the Lions in this game. Their passing offense between Hawkinson and Addison and Jefferson and the way Darnold's playing, it is going to be a challenge. They are going to score probably quite a few points against the Lions. I think there's no two ways about that.
Yeah, and it should be noted that last season, when the Lions ended up clinching the NFC North in Minnesota, Kirby Joseph became the
Yep.
most hated man in Minnesota for taking out TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson did not appear in the first matchup between these teams, I don't believe. He returned the week after. So this is the first time Hawkinson is playing against Kirby since that incident. And if there is a seam ball to Hawkinson and Kirby is in the area, Vikings fans are going to lose their minds because they are convinced that Kirby Joseph is the dirtiest player in the entire league right now. Packers fans are getting there too because he allegedly tried to take out Tucker Kraft, even though he's just trying to make a tackle on someone bigger than him. It's uh,
It
it's
the Kirby discourse is extremely stupid. I
it's
mean,
so funny.
he's like a 190-pound safety trying to tackle like 250-pound tight ends. You tackle them by going low and taking out their legs. Like, you're not going to drag them to the ground with your strength. Wait, everyone does this. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunate the way he came at a certain angle on some of these guys, but that's football. Like, we see this all the time. There's no need to engage because it's too dumb to waste our time on that. The thing I'll note about this game with the Vikings is they didn't really run the ball very well against the Packers. 69 yards on 26 attempts, 2.7 yards per carry. Jones was under 4 yards per carry. I'm not super scared of the Vikings run game. They didn't do a ton against the Lions. The first game they had one run that was really bad, one of the worst run reps the Lions have had all year. And then after that, they weren't super effective. So I expect it'll be a pass-heavy game. It's just kind of what we've talked about with the Lions defense, where they just need to get a couple stops and ideally a turnover or two and let your offense do the work, because the Vikings defense, vaunted for most of this season and parts of last year, has never been an issue for Jared Goff. He has owned Brian Flores better than any quarterback in the league. They hung 30, 40 points on him both times last year. They hung 30 some in the matchup this year earlier in the season, 31 points in that game. And in that game, it took Goff a little bit to get going. Lions were a little dazed to start. The crowd was kind of shaking him a little bit. And then once they got going, they were not stopped for most of the game there, from then on forward. And they gifted the Vikings 7 points in that game, too, with the scoop and score from Montgomery. So a little bit cleaner of a game. Just get a few stops and let your offense do the work. And if they play against Flores' defense the way they have in the previous matchups, I think they still got a pretty good shot to win, especially with the home crowd behind them.
Yeah, so this is obviously going to be everyone's been talking about this as the big chess match between Ben Johnson and Brian Flores. It'll be interesting to see what wrinkles Flores throws in, because he's kind of changed his approach every single game and he's never figured out the Lions offense. Fourth time's the charm? Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Look, the Lions have so many different wrinkles that they can throw at you. It's kind of the perfect kryptonite to a Vikings defense that throws everything at you, because the Lions have an answer to everything. The Lions wait for a defense. The boxing analogy is the Lions are counterpunchers essentially. They can impose their will on you. They can just overwhelm you, but they wait for you to make the first move and open the first window for a counterpunch, and then they attack you relentlessly. So I think they're going to be like the big problem with the game back in week 7 was the Lions got off to a slow start. They were down 10-0 in the blink of an eye. They had a terrible fake punt attempt early on. They couldn't generate anything in the first quarter. And then one long Jahmyr Gibbs touchdown, and everything changed. The entire game flipped on its head. The Lions put up 21 points in the second quarter alone. I don't know if that's going to happen again, but you just have to have a better start. That's kind of the long and short of it. The Lions have to get out to a better start. They have to force the Vikings to throw the ball, and then you have to rely on turnovers. So whether or not they could do that, I don't know. But if this game turns into a shootout, you have to feel good about the Lions' chances of staying in that game. And look, the closer the game is, the more home field actually does kind of matter. Having the home crowd behind you going to be a benefit versus hearing that stupid skull horn every single time the Vikings get a first down. It will be nice. It will be nice. So it's a small advantage for the Lions because it's so loud in Minnesota. Hopefully, Lions fans, primetime Sunday Night Football can bring some energy. And yeah, man, this is gonna be just an incredible game, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, I've got a few points on that. The home field, it matters a lot. I've said it's getting to a broken record at this point with the amount I've said it, but again, the Vikings are on a long win streak. I think they're now up to like 10 in a row, something like that. It just is really, really hard in this league to win that many in a row. It's why I always say that if you're a team going into the playoffs on a gazillion game win streak, I would be terrified just because you have clunkers that come along the way. And it wouldn't be very stunning if the Vikings finally have a bit of a letdown game on the road. Um, it's one you would it would make a lot of sense, but we'll see what happens. The biggest thing too with the starting on time is that's just not what the Packers did in this
Yep.
game, right? I mean, they got down big. We talked about it last week. What do they got to do? Don't turn it over on your first 5 possessions like the first game, and they turn it over on their first possession in this game. And there is some interesting things to talk about with the Packers, which we'll probably do in a playoff preview. Just questions about their ability to start on time routinely. It's now become a bit of an issue for them in some games against us and the Vikings over the years now. Very frustrating Jordan Love experience as well in that game, but I thought the Vikings really outcoached the Packers. They deserved the win, but now it's a new week, and we'll see what happens. My other point, I don't get the amount of trash talking between Lions and Vikings fan online. Like, passions and all that stuff, but like, come on, man. Lions had never made the Super Bowl. Vikings haven't made it in like 50 years. Why are these two teams trash talking? Hey,
The
we are
most
we are both
the
two
most
sides of the same coin when it comes to pain.
yeah, the most interesting subplot of the past 18 months in Lions fandom is how Vikings fans have become the most hated entity that the Lions fans have right now. More than the Packers, more than Packers fans, more than the Chiefs, like, and just their dominance, more than the Niners, more than anything. Right now, public enemy number one for Lions fans is Vikings fans. For Vikings fans, public enemy number one is Lions fans because the Vikings fans hate that the Lions are good and that Lions fans are finally able to gloat about how good their team is. And Lions fans hate Vikings fans just because they have been amongst the most delusional. Obviously not all Vikings fans are like this, but the Vikings seem to have more bad apples in the fan base compared to Bears and Packers fans. And so they just appear a lot more, and like, they're very proud. Vikings fans are very proud of their team, right? And no one has taken them seriously all season. They have got to be the most disrespected 14-win team in history because we're sitting here, their 14-win team. How many people are picking the Vikings to win the Super Bowl?
Not many.
Like, it's shocking. So Vikings fans are understandably feeling a bit of a little brother underdog mentality kind of syndrome where they just feel like blatantly disrespected based on what the team has done this season. They continue to win week in, week out, and no one gives them the credit they deserve. This Sunday night on a national TV, like prime time, everything you want, the whole world is watching. If the Vikings can deliver a signature win, it would legitimize their season to the national audience, to casual fans around the world. So Vikings fans are obviously pumped for that. If the Lions are going to win, then they will get the 1 seed for the first time ever. And
At least in the Super Bowl era.
the first time in the Super Bowl era.
Yeah, I mean the 50s there was only a couple teams in the playoffs that didn't really count, but the thing I'll say too about Vikings, like I get it. Their team has been disrespected. I think the way they've been treated by some of the national media has been pretty shocking
Darnold
for the
especially.
results the results they put up. It's a classic example of people being way too late to respond to new information and to update priors and takes, etc. At the same time, though, you are still the Minnesota Vikings. You can try, feel that your team's been disrespected this year, but you're also the same team that has an entire genre of mishaps in the playoffs just around kicking alone. Like, you can't do this whole "we're going to the Super Bowl and no one believes in us" thing. Like, I can't do that as a Lions fan too. Like, you got to actually make the Super Bowl once to begin to start to talk that way. Like, you can't have the history these two teams have had to act like that. But my final note on this game, honestly, is it's a really big game. It's an important game, all that stuff. But at the same time, it isn't as big of a game as I think some will make it out to be. And the reason is there is a very realistic possibility that these two teams will play again in the playoffs.
In
And
2 weeks, yeah.
it's entirely possible it will be the first playoff game for whoever wins this game. Like, all that has to happen is that team to win their wild card game, and the other two home teams to win. And then we'll have 1 versus 5, and we'll do it all over in either in Ford Field or in Minneapolis. So you want to win it, but if we win this game and then the Vikings come in here in a few weeks and win in the playoffs, it'll be the most meaningless big game win of all time. So
Yeah, look,
hoping for the best, but you also have to remember that it may not be the end of this team, and you still got to win games in the playoffs.
it's the biggest game until the next one. So
Yep.
that's the important thing to remember. But obviously, getting the 1 seed, getting that rest would be a big deal for both teams, especially a Lions team that is supposed to get some reinforcements in the divisional round. And, just personally, I hate playing in Minnesota. So please don't make us go back there because it's annoying. Even though we beat them there twice in a row, I don't like playing in Minnesota just because it's such a loud and it's a great atmosphere, and it's the same reason that back in the early 2010s, Lions fans used to hate going to Lambeau because it's just it had that aura around it. Obviously, Lambeau doesn't have that aura anymore for Lions fans and for the Lions in general, but it is just an atmosphere thing. So looking forward to Sunday night. It'll be a clash of two of the 3 or 4 best regular season teams so far, and it'll obviously set the stage for the playoffs to follow. We'll be back next week to preview Wild Card Weekend with or without the Lions' presence in it. So until then, enjoy the game. Enjoy this final weekend of regular season football. If you're a fan of a non-Lions team and you're missing out on the playoffs, well, you can cheer for the Lions. We welcome you onto the bandwagon. So we'll see you guys after that. Alex, do you have any final thoughts?
Hoping for the best. We'll see how it goes.
So once again, you can find the show on Twitter at Payne and Drain. You can find me at ZachPayne41. You can find Alex at Alex_Drain. And yeah, that'll be it for us this week. We'll catch you guys early next week with that preview. In the meantime, let's go Lions. Have a great weekend, everyone. Cheers.